Imagine a university campus filled with students eager for debate, a place buzzing with the energy of free speech and youthful curiosity. And then, in a single crack of gunfire, that energy turns into chaos, fear, and tragedy. Charlie Kirk, a well-known conservative activist and the co-founder of Turning Point USA, was shot and killed on September 10, 2025, while speaking at Utah Valley University in Orem, Utah. The incident occurred during one of his public appearances, where he was participating in a Prove Me Wrong booth as part of his American Comeback Tour. These events had become a signature style for him, attracting both supporters and critics, and were meant to encourage open debate with students and the general public. According to early reports from witnesses and law enforcement, the shooting took place in broad daylight, shocking those who were present. The university grounds, which are usually filled with students and campus activity, suddenly turned into a scene of chaos and panic as gunfire rang out. Kirk was struck in the neck, collapsing in front of the crowd, as people scrambled for cover and emergency services rushed to the scene. The location of the attack, a university campus, added a disturbing layer to the tragedy, raising questions about how such an incident could unfold in what was supposed to be a secure academic environment. Law enforcement later confirmed that the gunfire had come from a nearby rooftop, pointing to a calculated and deliberate act rather than a random shooting. Utah Valley University quickly went into lockdown, with students and staff ordered to shelter in place while authorities swept the area in search of the shooter. Despite rapid medical response, Kirk's injuries proved fatal. His death reverberated across the campus community, leaving students and faculty traumatized and sparking immediate national attention. The fact that the attack targeted such a prominent figure only intensified the media focus and public debate. This was not only the loss of a political personality, but also a violent intrusion into a space dedicated to education and dialogue, and it left many grappling with the unsettling reality that political violence had reached into the heart of a university setting. The details surrounding how Charlie Kirk was attacked point toward a deliberate and targeted act rather than an impulsive outburst of violence. Investigators determined that the fatal shot was fired from a rooftop near the Utah Valley University event grounds. This elevated position gave the shooter both a clear line of sight and an escape advantage, which strongly suggests premeditation and planning. Witnesses reported hearing a single sharp crack, after which chaos erupted, indicating the shooter likely used a high-powered rifle rather than a handgun. Law enforcement confirmed the recovery of such a weapon in the vicinity, believed to be the firearm used in the killing. The precision of the strike, hitting Kirk in the neck from a distance, added to the impression that this was not random gunfire, but a calculated shot aimed at a high-profile target. Attacks of this nature are rare, yet the details recall other instances of political violence in which individuals with public influence have been deliberately singled out. What unsettled many observers was not only the killing itself, but also the setting, a crowded campus environment where hundreds of students had gathered. The location ensured maximum visibility, amplifying the symbolic nature of the act. Security measures at such open events are often minimal, relying heavily on crowd management rather than anticipating sniper-style attacks, and this vulnerability appears to have been exploited. Authorities have stated that the shooter had carefully chosen both the vantage point and timing, waiting for Kirk to be exposed during his open-air engagement with students. The method revealed both tactical awareness and an intent to send a message through the choice of weapon and execution. A university campus, associated with learning and dialogue, was turned into the stage for a precise and violent strike that stripped away any illusion of safety in public discourse. The calculated nature of the act underscored growing fears that high-profile figures engaged in public debate are increasingly being treated as acceptable targets in an atmosphere of escalating political polarization. In the aftermath of the shooting, the focus quickly shifted to the urgent manhunt for the person responsible. Law enforcement agencies at every level became involved, with local police, state authorities, and federal investigators pooling resources to track down leads. The FBI joined the investigation almost immediately, given the political profile of the victim and the potential national implications of the attack. Officers combed through surveillance footage from the university, nearby businesses, and traffic cameras to piece together the movements of anyone who might have been near the rooftop from which the shot was fired. Witnesses were interviewed one after another, though most were caught in the chaos of the moment, and had only fragmented memories of the shooter's presence. Despite this, investigators managed to identify a possible suspect and released images of a person of interest to the public, urging anyone with information to come forward. The recovery of a high-powered rifle from a concealed location near the campus gave authorities a crucial piece of physical evidence. But fingerprints and DNA analysis would take time to process. Forensic teams worked carefully, trying to determine how long the weapon had been placed there and whether the shooter had accomplices. The size of the investigation reflected both the seriousness of the crime and the fear that it might inspire further attacks. Roadblocks were set up around Orem and beyond, with special units searching nearby buildings for additional clues. At the same time, rumors circulated online, adding confusion and misinformation that investigators had to counter with verified updates. Officials held frequent press briefings, balancing the need for transparency with the risk of compromising the search. The absence of an immediate arrest deepened public anxiety, as many wondered how a sniper could escape from such a high-profile scene without being apprehended. The coordinated search efforts made clear that authorities were treating the incident as a top priority, recognizing that until the shooter was found, questions of safety, motive, and accountability would remain painfully unresolved. The shooting drew immediate and strong reactions from across the political spectrum, with leaders, commentators, and citizens all grappling with the implications of what had just taken place. Utah's governor described the incident as a political assassination, a phrase that captured the gravity of the act and highlighted the belief that this was not a random tragedy, but a deliberate attack on a public figure for his political identity. National leaders, including members of both major parties, issued statements condemning the violence and calling for calm, though the undertone of political division was unmistakable. Some commentators emphasized that while disagreement and heated rhetoric are natural in a democracy, resorting to lethal force crosses a line that undermines the very foundation of open society. Others pointed to the increasingly toxic climate of political discourse, arguing that unchecked polarization and hostile narratives have created an environment where violence becomes thinkable to the most extreme individuals. On social media, tributes poured in from Kirk's supporters, who saw the killing as not just an attack on one man, but as a broader assault on the conservative movement and free speech. Critics of Kirk's politics, while maintaining their opposition to his views, also largely denounced the act of violence, acknowledging that such brutality only deepens divisions rather than resolves them. Media outlets covered the story with urgency, linking it to wider concerns about the safety of public figures and the escalation of politically motivated aggression in the United States. Universities, advocacy groups, and student organizations also weighed in, with many expressing fear over how the incident might chill debate on campuses that are supposed to be spaces for dialogue. The framing of the attack as politically motivated raised alarms about whether it could mark the beginning of a more dangerous era in which ideological battles are increasingly fought with weapons rather than words. At the same time, questions emerged about how public figures can be kept safe during open events without eroding the accessibility and openness that are vital to democratic engagement. The reactions revealed not only shock and grief, but also deep concern about the direction of political culture in America. Charlie Kirk was only 31 years old at the time of his death, and the loss resonated deeply because of both his youth and the influence he had managed to build in such a short span of time. He is survived by his wife, Erica Franzwe, a former Miss Arizona and a podcast host, along with their 2 young children. For many, the tragedy was not just about the silencing of a political voice, but about the devastation left behind for a young family now forced to navigate life without a husband and father. Kirk's career had been marked by his rapid rise in conservative politics. As the co-founder of Turning Point USA, he became a prominent face of campus activism, drawing attention for his ability to mobilize young conservatives and challenge what he described as liberal dominance in educational institutions. His public persona was shaped by a mixture of boldness, confrontational debate, and a keen use of media platforms to spread his message. Beyond his organizational role, Kirk was a regular presence on television, radio, and podcasts, where he consistently positioned himself as a defender of conservative values and free speech. Admirers credited him with energizing a new generation of activists, while critics argued that his style was intentionally provocative and polarizing. Regardless of perspective, his ability to capture attention and shape conversations in political and cultural arenas was undeniable. The sudden and violent end to his life forced many to reflect not just on the man, but on what his presence represented in the broader political landscape. Supporters mourned the silencing of a leader they believed spoke unapologetically for them, while others acknowledged that his controversial methods had nonetheless made him a significant figure in shaping debates about free expression, education, and the role of young voices in politics. His death, therefore, was not just a personal loss for those closest to him, but also a cultural moment that underscored how deeply intertwined his identity had become with ongoing national discussions. The void left behind was felt in both the personal sphere of his family and the public sphere of political activism. The killing of Charlie Kirk has quickly become more than just a personal tragedy. It has been framed as a warning about the broader trajectory of political discourse in the United States. The very setting of the attack, a university campus, brought forward uncomfortable questions about whether spaces intended for open dialogue can remain safe when ideological disagreements spill into acts of violence. Observers noted that this was not an isolated incident in the landscape of political hostility, but part of a disturbing pattern in which public figures are increasingly treated as targets rather than participants in debate. The use of a high-powered rifle, the deliberate vantage point chosen by the shooter, and the timing of the attack during a public engagement all suggested intent not merely to end one life, but to send a message about silencing certain voices. This raised fears that political violence could be emboldened if decisive action is not taken to confront the factors fueling such extremism. Gun rights and gun control became part of the conversation almost immediately, with some arguing that the proliferation of firearms in civilian life creates too many opportunities for acts of political aggression, while others insisted that the core issue lies in toxic rhetoric and radicalization rather than weapons themselves. Beyond the policy debates, the event also sparked reflection on the boundaries of free speech and the dangers of dehumanizing opponents in political battles. When public discourse normalizes hostility and vilification, the leap from words to violence becomes less unthinkable for individuals on the margins. For universities, the shooting prompted urgent discussions about how to balance accessibility with security when inviting controversial speakers or hosting political debates. The tragedy served as a grim reminder that the principles of dialogue, free expression, and democratic exchange can only thrive in an environment where safety is guaranteed. The implications extend beyond one campus or one political figure, pointing instead to a national reckoning with how polarization and extremism can erode the very structures meant to uphold civic life. The killing underscored the fragile line between passionate disagreement and destructive violence, a line that society now confronts with renewed urgency. The death of Charlie Kirk is more than the loss of one man. It is a chilling reminder of how fragile our public discourse has become. A life was taken in the middle of a campus meant for learning and debate, silenced not by argument, but by a bullet. His family has been left broken, his supporters devastated, and even his critics unsettled by the brutality of what unfolded. This was not just an attack on a person, it was an attack on the very idea that in a free society we can disagree without resorting to violence. If this tragedy teaches us anything, it is that we must find a way back from the brink, away from the poisonous rhetoric, away from the normalization of hate, and back toward a culture where words are stronger than weapons. To honor his memory and to protect the next generation, we must ensure that ideas are battled with ideas, not with guns.